Hello people, welcome to my first video of TK tutorials, and this first video will be about the numbers which we study in mathematics, and these numbers are the most basic and the most important and the most easiest part of the maths. If we don't study, if we don't understand or don't study these types of numbers, we might face problem in practicing future problems. So let's get started. At first, there are 14 types of numbers in mathematics. The first type of number are the natural numbers. Well, the natural numbers are all those numbers which exist in maths except 0 and includes 1 to infinity. Means it does not include 0. It does not include 0, but it includes all the numbers from 1 to infinity. Means natural numbers are all those numbers except 0, but it contains the numbers from 1 to infinity. Now, the second type of numbers are the whole numbers. Well, whole numbers are all those numbers that don't include any fraction or decimal, but they include 0. So this means, in this case, they include 0 and all the numbers but they don't include decimal or fraction. So it means, for example, the whole number says they include 0 and all the numbers they don't include decimal or fraction. So if we write one number chain like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5 and let's say 1/2. So these all numbers are whole numbers, and these both numbers are not whole numbers because these numbers are satisfying the first property, which is they include 0 and all the numbers, and these two numbers are satisfying the second property. They don't include decimal or fraction because 4.5 is a decimal and 1/2 is a fraction. So that's why. The third type of numbers are integers. Well, integers are all the whole numbers divided into two parts. There are positive integers and negative integers. Positive integers include 1 to infinity and negative integers include -1 to negative infinity. So now we will write so that it may clear your concept. Well, integers are divided into two parts, right? The first part is the positive integers. The second part are the negative integers. Well, the positive integers include the numbers from 1 to infinity or infinity. The second part, which are negative integers, contain -1 to negative infinity or infinity, which is negative. Okay, so it means that they include all the numbers, but it is divided into two parts. One part contains the positive integers, which is 1 to infinity, and the second part is negative integers, which is -1 to a negative infinity. Now, the fourth part. The fourth part of numbers are the even numbers. Well, even numbers are all those numbers which are divisible by 2. For example, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, and so on. So the first property of these numbers are that they are all divisible by 2. For example, they include 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. Because 2 is divisible by 2, 4 is also divisible by 2, 6 is also divisible by 2, which means 2 into 3 is 6, and 2 into 2 is 4, 2 into 1 is 2, 2 into 4 is 8, 2 into 5 is 10, and so on. So these all are even numbers. Now, the fifth type of numbers are the odd numbers. Well, odd numbers are all those numbers which are not divisible by 2. For example, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and so on. So they are just the opposite of the even numbers, which means they are all not divisible by 2. For example, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and so on. Because 3 is not divisible by 2, 5 is not divisible by 2, 7 is not divisible by 2, 9 is not divisible by 2, 11 is not divisible by 2, and so on. Now, let's come on to the sixth part. Oh wait, I forgot to tell you that there is an important note here. The important note is that 0 is an even number because every alternate number is an even number. Like how we write, like justify or see the difference between odd and even numbers. Like if we write a numbered line or number chain like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So how we find the even or odd numbers? Well, we found out that even numbers has a property which is they are all divisible by 2, and odd numbers have a property that they are all not divisible by 2. How simple is that? So basically, 1 is not divisible by 2, which means this is odd number. 2 is divisible by 2, so it's an even number. 3 is an odd number. 4 is an even number. 5 is an odd number. 6 is an even number. 7 is an odd number. 8 is an even number. 9 is an odd number. 10 is an even number because of these properties. But 0, and what comes before 0 is -1. So what we learned here, that every alternate number is an even number. Alternate means after one number. So after 1 there is another number which is called 2. So it's an even number because every alternate number is an even number. So that's how if minus 1 is an odd number, so minus 1, after minus 1, the number is known as 0. So that's why the alternate of minus 1 is 0. So that's why 0 is an even number. This is the most commonly asked question, that whether 0 is an odd number or even number. The answer is that the 0 is even number and minus 1 is an odd number. So let's move on to the sixth type of numbers, which is called the prime numbers. Well, prime numbers are all those numbers which are divisible by 1 and themselves. For example, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11 and so on. Like, it has the first property, which is known as that these are all numbers, are all those numbers which are divisible by 1 and themselves. For example, so the prime numbers contains a property which is are all those numbers which are divisible by 1 and themselves. For example, 2, 3, 5, and 7, 11 and so on. So in this case, 2 is divisible by 1 and itself. So the same is with the rest of these numbers and so on. Now let's come on to the seventh property of numbers, which are the perfect squares. Well, the perfect squares are all those numbers whose square root is a whole number. For example, 1, 4, 9, 16 or 25. Well, perfect squares contains the property which are all those numbers whose square root is a whole number. Like, for example, 1, 4, 9, 16 and so on. For example, 4. If we square root 4, the answer is 2, which is a whole number. And 2 is a whole number as satisfied by the whole numbers property, which is they include 0 and all the numbers. In all the numbers except decimal or fraction. So here from this example we learned that 2 is a whole number. So that's why 4 is a perfect square, because it's under root. When we put under root on it, the perfect square of 4 is 2. So that's why these all are perfect squares. For example, if you under root 9, the answer will be 3, which is a whole number. And if we under root 16, the answer will be 4. And if we under root 1, the answer will be 1. And if you guys don't know about the under rooting of perfect squares, so how we apply these under roots, like if we put under root 9, so we see that which number is divisible by itself to make this particular number. For example, like in this case, 3 is a number which will multiply itself, which will give 9. So this method is for underrooting and completing square method, like underrooting method. which will give you perfect squares. Now, let's move on to 8 type of numbers, which are composite numbers. Well, composite numbers are all those numbers which are not prime numbers. For example, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 15. So, these are all those numbers which are not prime numbers. And what we learned in the property of prime numbers, that is, these are all those numbers which are divisible by 1 and themselves. But in this case, composite numbers are all those numbers which are not prime numbers. For example, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. No. This is the example of prime numbers. But the example of composite numbers are 4, 6, 8, 10, and 15 because they contradict the property of prime numbers, which are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 15, and so on. They contradict the property of prime numbers, which is these are all those numbers which are divisible by 1 and themselves. But in this case, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 15 are not all those numbers which are not divisible by 1 and themselves. Because 4 is divisible by 2 and 4 is divisible by itself also. So that's why when it's divisible by 2, it's contradicting the property of prime numbers. So that's why composite numbers are all those numbers which are not prime numbers. So it's simple.